I walked through the front gate, my shoes crunching softly against the gravel, feeling the weight of their eyes before I even saw them. The house smelled the same, lavender from the hallway diffuser, faint vanilla from the candles, but something was off. My mother stood at the door, her lips tight, eyes flicking over me with a precision that cut deeper than words. "We're only inviting you out of pity, so don't stay long," she said, her tone polite, rehearsed, but sharp enough to make the air vibrate. I smiled. Just a small, quiet smile that didn't reach my eyes. I nodded as if I understood, as if her words meant nothing. But inside, every syllable stung like acid. For years I'd carried the unspoken, the dismissals, the comparisons, the subtle reminders that I was always less than the image she wanted me to be. Tonight was no different. Yet tonight I had learned something she hadn't counted on. Patience was a weapon. The living room hummed with laughter that felt forced. Cousins whispered behind hands, exchanging glances that weren't kind. Dad, quiet as always, pretended to sip his wine, careful not to spill a hint of his discomfort. I took a seat, hands folded, eyes calm, heart racing. Let them think I am weak, I told myself. Let them smile their hollow smiles. They don't see what I've prepared. A niece, barely old enough to understand family politics, tripped over her words introducing me to a new friend. She laughed nervously, and my mother shot her a look sharp enough to silence her. I caught her eye briefly and nodded, a silent promise. I wasn't here to argue or defend. I was here to observe, to remember, and to wait. The conversation moved to casual updates. Promotions, vacations, engagements. Every word another test. I noted the patterns. Who whispered to whom, who avoided my gaze, who tried too hard to appear generous. And then, just as I began to feel invisible, my mother leaned in, voice low but clear. "Remember, we don't owe you anything. Tonight, you're here by courtesy, nothing more." I smiled again. Quietly. I took a slow sip of water, letting the silence stretch between her words and the next forced laugh. The room seemed smaller now, every corner echoing with subtle hostility. I could feel the judgment, the hidden calculations in every glance. It was exhausting watching them perform their version of civility. But I had learned long ago that appearances are fragile. One wrong word, one unnoticed slip, and the mask cracks. Dinner arrived. Silverware clinked against plates, and the aroma of roasted chicken filled the air. I listened carefully, noting the small signs of discomfort, the hesitations in their tone. My mother's laughter came at all the wrong times, too loud, too rehearsed. She wanted me to feel small, to squirm under her invisible scrutiny. I didn't. I kept my composure, eyes calm, body still, hands folded on the table. Let her think she's winning, I reminded myself. Everything she says, everything she does, I see it. I catalog it all. Then came the question I had anticipated. "So, when will you bring someone to meet us? Surely you don't plan to stay single forever?" The room paused, waiting for my reaction. I smiled again. Quietly. I said nothing. The words I wanted to speak simmered beneath the surface, restrained but sharp. Their expectation of embarrassment, of shame, was their first mistake. I caught my father's subtle nod, almost imperceptible, a quiet encouragement I had missed as a child. I realized then that the power in the room wasn't held by the loudest voice or the sharpest tongue. It was held by restraint, by calm observation, by patience, by knowing that when the time came, silence could speak louder than any argument. And then my mother's hand brushed against mine briefly, almost accidentally, or so she thought. I let my eyes meet hers for a moment, letting the unspoken words hang in the air. "You don't control me. Not tonight. Not ever again." After dinner, the chatter faded. Guests drifted to the living room, claiming tiredness or obligations elsewhere. I stayed at the table, quietly stacking my plate, savoring the stillness that came once the performance ended. My mother's gaze followed me, sharp, searching, but I didn't flinch. I had already won in ways she couldn't measure. Patience, composure, and knowing every move she had made tonight. As I rose to leave, she attempted one last subtle barb, her voice soft but calculated. "Don't let it get to your head. Remember why you were invited." I smiled once more, quiet, unshaken. No words were needed. The smile carried everything: confidence, calm, and the quiet assertion that I was no longer bound by her rules or judgments. Stepping outside, I inhaled the cool night air. The gravel crunched under my shoes again, echoing like a quiet applause. I had walked into their world on their terms, but I left on mine. Silence had been my ally, observation my weapon, and restraint my victory. Tonight wasn't about confrontation. It was about reclaiming peace, dignity, and the quiet knowledge that respect can never be demanded. It can only be earned, remembered, and quietly held. And as I walked down the driveway leaving the house behind, I realized I hadn't just survived the night, I had rewritten my place in their story calmly, quietly, and without a single word wasted.